a very serious new warning has just been issued by the leading cybersecurity firm Checkpoint for the owners of flagship Android smartphones from Samsung and others, that your phone may be carrying a chip with a fundamental flaw that needs to be patched urgently.
How would this be exploited in a real world attack scenario, Zach?
The issue they found is with the 5G modem chip, essentially, which has an interface both to the outside world, so to the cellular network, and also to the Android operating system. The way it can be exploited is through malware on the Android device. The issue is if that malware can then plant itself inside the vulnerability on the chipset, then it can't then be found. You can't clean the device ultimately. And that malware can then do what malware does. It can steal your data, it can steal your security credentials, and it ultimately can spy on you as well.
In contrast, it's just so different when you're an Apple user, isn't it? I mean, on Monday this week, we had another iOS update, which wasn't one of their big updates. It wasn't 14.5, it was 14.5.1, which was a pure security update, which patched 2 security vulnerabilities. So as an iOS user, you can pretty much just sit back, can't you? And you can just expect that to be happening. As an Android user, you have to be chasing it.
Qualcomm told me that they patched the vulnerability back in December. And what that means is that they would have issued a patch to the OEMs, to the phone manufacturers that are impacted. Primarily, I think it's Samsung, but it's also Google and Xiaomi and LG, I believe, premium 5G smartphones in the main. But it's then for those manufacturers and actually for the carriers as well to deploy those fixes to users. Unlike Apple, it doesn't simply roll out from the core software developer.
In terms of how they're going to get the updates out to everybody, how that's going to happen on time.
Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it? So Checkpoint is unclear exactly which phones have been updated. I've reached out to Samsung and Google and asked. I've yet to have an answer.
Fractured ecosystem of Android is something that was getting on top of me for many years. I spent about 10 years as an Android user. And towards the end of that time, although Samsung, which was the devices that I used, Samsung did improve on their frequency, timing of security updates. That was then kiboshed, but depending on what carrier you were with, who your phone was made by, etc., etc. I was ending up with a security update that should be available on the 1st of the month, sometimes not hitting me until the middle of the following month. And obviously that leaves an exploit window open for far too long.
If you are an iPhone user, if you're an iOS user, the warnings you get that you need to update your device are clearer. The process you need to go through to get those updates are clearer. When Apple makes those updates available, they're available to everyone at the same time, pretty much. Which means that if you're taking note of such things, you can keep yourself safe. I'm guessing, David, the frustration if you're a Samsung Android user is that even if there has been an issue, you're well aware that there's been this warning. There's nothing you can do.
Precisely right. Yeah. Even if the update's there for some people, even if that vulnerability has been disclosed, so the bad folk, the threat actors, know what it is and can therefore have a chance of exploiting it. Unless that's made available to your device through your carrier, through that network, you can't get it.
Checkpoint told me, I mean, they described what they could see as very serious. It was dangerous. In their view, it could take a year from the initial disclosure to go through the actual impacted software developer or manufacturer to go to the OEMs to actually get out to consumers. So that actual kind of soup to nuts delay from a security disclosure to actually getting the fixes out there, it can be a very long time for all users.
I mean, the other thing I think might be interesting with this one, Zach, is to ask what people can actually do and how at risk they might be as well. I mean, if you're just an average person who's got an Android device, you don't kind of particularly work in an industry, for example, where you might be highly targeted by cyber attackers, do you need to worry and what can you do?
There's nothing you can do other than make sure your device is updated. This isn't an update to the core Android operating system. This isn't that kind of firmware update. It's a patch to a hard part of the hardware on the device itself. So you probably won't know whether you're impacted, whether it's on your phone, but you should make sure that your firmware is updated. The reality of this is Checkpoint has no evidence that this has been exploited in the wild. It's really hard to crack the proprietary software on these chipsets. So it's a very, very sophisticated vulnerability. But we know, and we've seen lots over the last few years of nation state levels of sophisticated attacks on Android and iOS, where you kind of got a fantastic threat vector, you know your targets are going to have these devices. This is precisely the kind of vulnerability that would be exploited by a nation state attacker.